Grief is such an overpowering emotion, especially after losing someone so close to you. It can take months, years, even decades to get back to normal, if that's even possible after experiencing a significant loss. This podcast was created to help you move through and release the emotions, allowing you to heal the hurt and begin living again. Listen in as I chat with medical professionals, grief workers, and people who have first-hand experience in losing a loved one, what their experience has been, and what they did to help heal themselves and those around them. Life isn't always sunshine and rainbows, but I believe there is always a silver lining if you're willing to look. Welcome to the Release Podcast. Hi, welcome to another episode of Release Grief Podcast. Today I'm here with the most beautiful Kathy Comstock. And we kind of have a history together, but I will let her talk about all of that if she chooses to. This is her episode and her talking about all the things. And Kathy, why did you sign up to be on this podcast all about grief? Before I just go and blurt everything out for you.
Right. I love that you were giving people a place to feel heard. And I guess my hope in coming on here was that people could hear what I've been through and hopefully glean some hope that there is hope through some really dark things. There's always hope. And so that was my goal in coming on here.
Oh, that is beautiful. Yes, I think that no matter what, through the darkest of times, there's always a glimmer of light.
Yeah.
If you look for it, if you choose to see that, otherwise you get stuck in the darkness for a very long time.
Yeah.
And can you tell me some about what you're facing, what your ordeals were?
Sure thing. So I feel like a lot of my life has dealt with loss, which I didn't really understand fully until I started seeing a psychologist like almost 4 years ago. More on that later. But my childhood wasn't normal or normal. And I even told my psychologist, well, I feel like my childhood wasn't super normal. Like every family's got a little bit of crazy. And she said, yes, Kathy, but yours is not like a normal amount of crazy. And that was my first clue to maybe I should check in with my younger self and see
Right.
what is going on. And so just it was a very unhealthy family dynamic. I don't know if you've seen Shiny Happy People, the Duggar documentary, but very much like fundamentalist Christian, which is not all bad. And it wasn't, I wouldn't say quite to the extent of the Duggars, but pretty strict household where we weren't really allowed to have an opinion or say so. Learned from a very young age that having either of those things was dangerous.
Yes.
Which set me up for right out of high school. I joined what I thought was a super stellar hands-on ministry internship called.
So I'm going to pause you for just a second, just so I can get a little more clarity in here. Okay, so when you talked about your childhood, you were now you're talking about a Christian-based childhood. Okay, so raised in a Christian household. And then those thoughts and ideas, you were not allowed to have anything but what they were telling you, correct?
Right. Yes. So if I liked a certain kind of music that wasn't in line with what was okay or safe or Christian enough, wasn't allowed to listen to it. So when you hear people talk about the families that weren't allowed to watch Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, or Pokemon was the devil, that was very much my parents. So that kind of situation. Yeah. That's not everybody's ordeal, but that was definitely my ordeal growing up. Yeah. And so I was on track to join this internship, and I did. And it started off really, really great. And it was fun. So it was basically we would travel all over the world and tell people about Jesus. So we do drama, Saturday Night Live kind of style, sketches. Some were funny, some were really impactful and more serious. We have a worship team, a worship band, and a whole live stage setup. So we'd set up trussing with lighting equipment, giant state-of-the-art sound system, all of that kind of stuff. And so I was living this roadie life with my best friends and thought I was having the time of my life. And never really realized again until I got out, like
Right.
how abusive that system was. And it got really bad around like my fourth year in there. Um, I was
And when you
basically,
talk about, hold on, when you talk about a
yeah.
system, what are you meaning?
Okay. So basically, the way it's set up in Go is very much like my home was set up growing up. So, like, you are not allowed to have an opinion that differs from leadership. You cannot say anything bad or against leadership. Um,
Okay.
like down to silly things like we had to like the sports teams they liked or we were in
Really?
rebellion, so like right, so like that's a little wackadoodle, right, like that's a little crazy.
Little
um
brainwashing, yes.
yeah, same fast food restaurants, like if I liked Chick-fil-A better than Cane's, no way, like that was grounds to like literally get called out in front of the whole team for like rebellion.
Really?
Yeah.
And you
For not.
mentioned Go. What is
Yep.
that?
So Go Ministries International is this internship that I was a part of.
Okay,
Um,
gotcha.
yep. And so it got really bad around my fourth year, and that's when I started. I was the what was their title even then? The executive ministry directors. I
Okay.
was their nanny, their personal assistant, administrative assistant, like chef, and like maid, like AKA essentially like a house slave. And I
Right.
don't say that lightly. I mean it like in all sincerity. Like if you've seen Harry Potter, for all my Harry Potter fans out there, I was essentially Dobby, except I wouldn't have to iron my own hands. They would like push me into the wall if I messed up. So like it got
Really?
to like it was very verbally abusive, extremely emotionally and spiritually abusive, and at times physically abusive. And so, and that wasn't just me. Uh, like Go as a whole believed in like corporal punishment. It's like if one person got it wrong, the whole team was punished. And when I say punished, I mean like put on a line and running for 5 hours till everyone's throwing up, punished. And
Oh,
that's not an exaggeration. That's something I've literally had to do. Or like,
oh, wow.
yeah, so like stuff that's crazy intense. To kind of put it into perspective, like we've had people that have gone through basic training for the military and have done Go Ministries physical boot camp and said that physical boot camp at Go was harder. So if that gives you any
Really?
sort of barometer for the level of stuff that they're doing, um, without medical professionals on site, without anybody that is professionally trained to be running these sorts of things, it just sets it up to be a disaster, right?
Right.
Yeah. So,
And young,
um,
impressionable people coming in there, they're easily molded to how they
yeah,
want them to be and
yeah,
becoming these subservient humans that
exactly.
are just used to taking abuse mentally,
Yep,
physically, spiritually, emotionally, any other ease.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep,
Okay.
exactly.
And how big is this? How big is this ministry? Put this into perspective for me, like how big this ministry is.
So, the biggest internship team we had while I was there was 68 interns.
Wow.
There's about anywhere from like 12 to 20 people on staff at a time. And it's just this revolving door of high schoolers coming in and staying for however long Go can like convince them to stay before they leave.
Right.
Because that's like another thing that really flags it as a cult is like leaving is not easy or really an option.
Right.
And once you do, you're excommunicated and are like the bad guy. So,
Got
um,
you. So I've watched, I have dove down the rabbit hole of Scientology and I've
yeah,
listened to that stuff. So this sounds like similar on par with
yeah.
Scientology.
So a few, I agree. That's actually, I will get to that later, but something that's really helpful is watching cult documentaries
Yes.
for me to like get all the through lines because it's amazing how many are similar. So Scientology is like Sea Org, very
Yes.
much like Go Ministries. So without
Okay.
swapping the decks on a ship in international waters. So if you take away the giant sailing ship, Sea Org was a lot
Right.
like Go. Um, now we didn't have a what did they call it? A room where they threw people in for days on end. Like we didn't have
Yeah.
that,
Okay.
but they would put people on what they called probation, and that was a strict set of rules that they had to adhere to, or they got kicked out. Um,
Mhm.
so basically the same thing without four walls, essentially, and closing them. So really intense things. And so, um, and the whole time you're in there, you don't even realize because you're so gaslit the whole time.
Right. Well, they
Um,
make you feel like it's your fault, right? Like everything
yeah,
is your
100%.
fault.
I literally, like, for an example, like one day I didn't have the diaper bag ready to go. Because remember, I was their nanny too. So two little
Mhm.
kids that I raised, like I was at the hospital when both of them were born and like homeschooled them through like preschool through second grade. Like was a large
Okay.
part of their life. Like was there from sun up to sundown all day, every day.
Mm.
Um, I didn't have the diaper bag ready for like an overnight trip that I didn't know that she was planning on going on. And I got in trouble because I should have heard the Holy Spirit should have told me, get the diaper bag ready for a night trip that she's going to go on with no communication. Like I'm supposed to be able to like read her mind, or like the Holy Spirit's supposed to tell me to have this diaper bag ready. And because I didn't, I got in trouble. And that was like in trouble would look like I literally got screamed at for like 15 minutes in the kitchen. Because I wasn't being led by the Spirit of God inside of me, you know?
Wow.
Yeah, so crazy things. So, like, that kind of environment for like a decade and some change, like 12 years I was there. And so Faith actually met you for the one little year I got out. So I don't even know how. And still to this day, I'm like, how did I even manage that? Um, I got out for a year and I moved back to Minnesota just because I felt like I was supposed to. And
Mhm.
that was like unheard of in Go. Like people don't do
Really?
that. Yeah, you don't leave. You're just stuck there
Yeah,
forever.
because you said that you were there and you didn't know why you were there, but you were
Yeah,
there in
like
Minnesota because I was
yeah,
attending a church for like one of the only times in my life.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but yeah, and I met Kathy there at this church.
yeah,
One of my fondest memories of this church, because
yeah,
I've had some bad experiences with that church as well. And so it's like, I mean,
yeah. Right. So and like to put that into perspective too, like when I told Josh and Lacey I wanted to leave, like Lacey's response was, well, now I'm gonna go into the other room and shoot myself. Like that's what she told me she was gonna do. And I was like, I feel like I'm supposed to leave for a year. Like, so literally told me that she felt like she needed to go kill herself. So like that's the amount of like manipulation, like
wow, that's
crazy.
heavy.
Yeah, right. And so, like, and pairing that back to my childhood, like my mom had told me when I was in early years of middle school that if they ever found her dead and she had done it herself, it was my fault. So, like, literally played like right into that.
Oh, wow. So your mom
Right.
and your dad, okay.
Yeah.
I need to break this down a little bit because you
Yeah.
just like threw out a whole bunch of stuff and I need to like I need to process this for a
Yeah.
second. Just
Yep.
okay. So in your childhood, were your parents a part of Go Ministries as well?
My mom cooked for us. She was our chef for a few years.
At Go
And
Ministries.
Echo Ministries,
Okay.
and she only stayed because she was afraid to leave me there by myself because she kind of realized like she was an adult and I was not, and so and a parent and I was not, and so she realized the toxicity that was there that I my eyes were completely oblivious to.
Of
Because I
course,
was
because you were
and
raised this way. So you didn't
yeah.
see any red flags.
Yep. And so, but my mom, because the way they were treating her, she was like, hold on, this is not okay and not right. Um, and I just wouldn't listen. Like, there's more than one time where I told my parents, like, or my parents would be like, Kathy, you got to come home, like, come home. And I would tell them, how dare you come against the call of God on my life? Like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, because
Where
that's
were
what we
you
were
at
told.
that time?
Louisiana. So I
Where
moved
did
with
your
this cult
Okay.
from Minnesota to Louisiana and was in Louisiana
Okay.
with around 8 years or so in total.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So your mom was trying to tell you to come out and your father too?
Yeah. And so I've always been a daddy's girl. My mom and I have had a really, I guess had a really too much, like really yucky relationship, like pretty much my whole life. Um, I couldn't even really tell you why. um, but like I always felt, well, and a lot of it was probably just like the environment I was in. Like something my psychologist asked me. She's like, Kathy, can you ever remember a time where you didn't feel like emotionally responsible for your mom? And I like sat there and I thought about it and I thought about it. It's like, no, like it was my job to make sure that I didn't rock the boat. It was my job to make sure that her baseline was okay. It was my job to make sure that, all of my siblings picked up their toys. And I'm second youngest, but that I like took it on as my job to like make sure that everybody was like okay, so that mom was okay, so she wasn't like freaking out at us. And
So did
so
any of your other siblings go into Go Ministries?
no, thank God. I have four older siblings. They all have had pretty much nothing to do with the church, because of their really awful experience in the church when they were younger. And my
Right.
younger brother, never really got into Go. He was like Go adjacent for a little while my mom was still cooking, like would come up every once in a while with her to see us, to see me. Because we lived on a ranch, isn't that just culty? So he'd come up to visit every once in a while, but yeah, no, none of them, all five of my siblings, none of them have really anything to do with like religion or the church at this point. Yeah.
Were they telling you to come out as well? Or did you have a good relationship with them?
I've had a decent relationship with all my siblings, which is saying something because there's so much like interfamily drama and like
Right.
tension. Um, Again, so harkening back to like every family is crazy, but mine is like not a normal amount for my psychologist. But yeah, I have what my psychologist said, remain Switzerland through all of this. And it's what I'm good at, like just
Right.
being a peacemaker. And that has its pros and its cons big time, when you're learning to process through some things. But yeah, so none of my siblings were like get out except for my sister Tammy, and she's my oldest sibling, and she never said, Kathy, you got to get out of there. But for that year that I was like out of Go, we hung out a lot because she still lived in Minnesota at the time, actually in Monticello too.
Okay.
And so we went out boating one evening, and she's like, I just kind of think Go might be a cult. And I was like, I literally told her, I could see why people would say that, but I just know from being on the inside, it's not. And looking back
But
now,
these are the things that you think, right? It's like,
yes, no,
okay, I
for
can understand
sure.
why someone would think this, but
Yeah,
from my perspective, it's not.
exactly. Like these people love me, they care about me. Like we were made to call the like head and founder of the ministry dad and his daughter mama, which is weird when you think about it now.
Yes.
That's weird, but we were
Yeah.
forced to tell them that. If we didn't, we weren't showing them the honor they deserved in their eyes, and we were in big time trouble, you know,
Right.
trouble, i.e., being physically punished, like corporal militant, like military style punishment. Um, yeah, so crazy
That is
thing.
insane.
Yeah, so to hear Lacey say, "Well, I'm gonna go shoot myself," instantly brings me back to little
Yeah,
Cat hearing my mom say, "Well, if I ever kill myself, it's your fault." You know, um,
because you're
you know,
never good enough.
right. Well, and that was followed up with my mom actually like pushed me down the stairs after that. Because I was threatening to run away. Because our family situation was a little nuts, right? Or maybe a lot
Yeah.
nuts, psychologists would probably say. Um, yeah, so that I'm still amazed that I got out for that year. But even during that year, like Josh and Lacey, who are the ministry directors, who were my most prevalent abusers, I would say Lacey, if I had to name one, has been like the most like prevalent abuser in my life. She and her husband Josh were in regular contact with me. Still like making sure I was like doing all the right things. So still like micromanaging
Yeah.
my life
I
from
remember
across
you
the
saying that
country.
you talk to them quite frequently.
Yeah. Yep.
Your
And
old
so
nanny is what you called them, your old nanny.
yeah, my old nanny family. And so so they still definitely had a presence in my life that year I was gone. And then I ended up taking, so I was a children's pastor at that church,
Yep.
which I didn't want to do. Like I told them probably a lot of times, three I could think of, like, no, I don't want that position. No, thank you. And then
And this
basically,
was the pastors of the church that we went to together, right?
yeah, yep.
Okay.
No thanks. I was like, okay, I'll do it as long as you're like actively looking for someone, to like take that position. Because honestly, after being voluntold, to deal with kids for 12 years and go, I was like, I just no thanks.
Right.
Like I would
Like,
like
I
to
don't
just
want
be a
anything
normal.
to do with kids right now. I'm done. Tap
Yeah,
out.
like yep. And so I was children's pastor at the time because I have a really hard time. I still have a hard time, but back then I had an even harder time saying no to people
Right.
asking anything of me because boundaries were not only like not a thing I really knew about, but they were definitely not allowed. um,
No. And
so yeah,
apparently, and not apparently, but especially when you have a narcissistic abuser, like
yeah,
those boundaries, they're just non-existent for them. And if you don't comply with what they want, then they try another tactic, which is usually mental or physical abuse.
yes, which has been true in both cases of my mom and Lacey. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so while I was the children's pastor, I took some of the kids from that church to a summer camp, a kids camp that Go was ministering at, because that's
Oh.
one of like, and at this time I still didn't realize like, hey, Go is not good. But the way I explain Go to is like the ministry that Go puts out is really impactful and has changed a lot of people's lives, like myself included. Um, but how they work on the inside, like the way that that whole system is set up, is just so toxic and bad and really abusive. Um, so I don't in my brain, I'm like, the ends don't justify the means. Like you can't hurt
Right.
people to justify helping people, right?
Right.
So um so I was bringing the kids to Go because the ministry they do put out, especially kids camps, I know is like top tier, super stellar, well thought out. Gives the kids an opportunity to connect with Jesus. Cool, cool, cool. That's all things a children's pastor should want for their kids, right?
Right.
And so we went on that trip. Um, and at that trip, they straight up talked me into coming back. And so this is something like once you've been um, narcissistically abused or once you've been in a cult, I forget what the exact number is, but you are at a much higher risk for going back to a cult, going back to a narcissistic abuser, because it's what's familiar, it's what you know. And even though it's hurtful and it's hard, it's what's safe to you because it's all you know,
Right.
right?
It's the, the road that you know, as opposed to going down the path that you've never been.
Exactly. And so I did. I went back after a year of being out. I went back.
Mm.
And
Is that why
I
you left here in Minnesota, was
yeah,
to go back there?
to go.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I disappeared. And so once you're in
So
Go,
hold on. Was the church that we were a part of, were they a part of Go Ministries as well?
no, they were not.
Okay.
Yeah. And so um I'm actually glad I went back because after being out for a year, um, like right away I noticed like, wow, this feels kind of yucky. Like this doesn't feel
Okay.
like I thought it would. Um, and I couldn't pinpoint anything right away because I didn't have any sort of a barometer to even like
Right.
question, because questioning's wrong and not allowed.
Right.
Right. And something else that's very heavy and Go is like emotions are like not allowed. Like you're
Yeah.
supernatural and that's it. Like if anyone asks you how you are, like you must respond supernatural or you get in trouble. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So you can't you can't have a bad day. You can't be in a funk. You can't have a bad attitude because that's not allowed. Um,
So you said that there was like 68 kids that came in like on a
mhm,
rotating basis, right?
mhm.
Um, of these 68 kids, how many stayed? Did all of them stay?
No, some people would leave after 1 year. Some people would leave after two. I think probably most people left by the time they hit third year there. Um,
They were
and
just done with Go, period, or they just went to a different area of with Go, or did they
yeah,
leave?
so or they'd get hired out of Go, and that was one thing that a lot of people were kind of looking for. So we have lots of interns that were placed in like churches that Go is connected with as like youth pastors, children's pastors, worship leaders, in churches. Um, and so, but some people just left because they were like, this sucks and I don't like the way I'm treated here. And so I have, no shame in telling
So
that.
how did people bring like how so I'm just still curious as to how people would come in to go, like how these kids would come in to go, those 68 kids. Was it because their parents wanted them to be in there? Was it that they were targeting high school kids like specifically? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so both. I'd say some parents wanted their kids to go and go like a part of go was called Champion Ranch. And that was for what they called behaviorally challenged teens. And so some
Oh.
people would actually get like sent to us that way, like high school kids.
Is that
Um,
from the judge would send them
yeah,
there? Oh,
yep.
really?
We
Okay.
were not accredited or anything. Like they're not
Right.
accredited, they're not licensed to be a rehab place. They don't have anybody that has done any schooling there for any of that. There's zero like formal training for anybody that is in leadership and go. Like the only
Right.
person who has ever been to any sort of a college or anything that is in leadership and go is the founding pastor. Everybody else has never gone to a Bible college. So they have literally zero like official credentials.
Yet they're
um,
getting these kids sent to them from the judicial system.
yeah. And that wasn't very many. Not very many came through the judicial system. A lot was like the parents would send
Okay.
them. And so that was for the behaviorally challenged teens. And so that's how they came. But then the other people who came to go would see go on the road because, like, right, we're traveling all over. And so they see flashy lights, funny dramas,
Be
oh,
fun.
a
A part
band.
of something.
Yeah, kids that look cool. Like, what? You can love Jesus and not wear like a suit and an ugly tie. Like, you can look cool and love Jesus. You can have your nose pierced and love Jesus. Like, you can have tattoos and love Jesus. Like, so
Yeah.
they see that and that's attractive, right?
Mhm.
That would be something it was to me, like, whoa, people. And they also genuinely care about people. So, like, all of the interns on the road talking to all these kids, like, making them feel seen and heard and valued because we genuinely did,
Yeah.
wanted to be them, wanted to love them, wanted them to feel the value that we felt their life held. And we, as I feel like any decent human being, would want to show
Right.
someone, right? And so that's another reason I can say I know the level of ministry going out was top tier because I was a part of that. And a lot of my friends were a part of that, like reaching kids on like a one-on-one level. Right. And so so imagine like someone just like sang a whole worship set or did a whole concert set and then comes off the stage and is like wanting to talk to you and like
Yeah.
wanting to and like cult verbiage, we'd call that love bombing. Right. And
That's the
so
narcissistic terms now. Yeah.
yeah, to
Love
yep,
bombing them to
yep,
make them feel seen and heard because these kids are probably coming from, looking for love and validation and
yep,
support, and they're not getting it at home.
yep. And so that was a part of it. So kids would come from seeing us on the road thinking that that's what they were signing up for. And so they don't
Mhm.
know that behind the scenes, like, yes, you'll maybe get to be a part of all of that, but behind the scenes, you're going to run until you puke. You're going to write Luke 16:10 out of the Amplified 700 times in 24 hours, you get another 100 added. So like crazy things that you just don't are, boys and girls could not like even associate with each other, like super separation, like crazy stuff. They don't know that that's what they're signing up for, and their parents don't either. They just see
Mhm.
go on the stage, and like, wow, that's something great for my kid to be a part of,
And that
and
would be something normal, like something that I would say. It's like, oh, I would,
yeah.
this sounds like something that my child might, they want to be a part of it. Who am
Mhm.
I to stop them from having
Right.
this experience and cultivating this relationship with Jesus Christ, right?
Right. Yeah, and like traveling all over the world with like 20 of your best friends, like that's a dream, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so that's why people would come, and that's why interns or how interns would come in. And so Go would do events like all over the country and Canada mainly. Be it at churches or outdoor like outreach services at parks we did stuff in like prisons and juvenile halls. We've done stuff just about anywhere you can think. Like we've probably done a service in that sort of an area. And so people see us there, including like giant conventions. Like we did Southwest Believers Convention, like they brought us in to help. That's with Kenneth Copeland. We've done Super Kids, also a part of Southwest Believers Convention in Kenneth Copeland. We've done Champions for Christ, which is Chip Brim, like Billy Brim's son, like his whole organization. And so people see us at those larger events, and those were like big time draws for kids that would see us there to come.
Yeah, so the kids just want to find a place to plug in. They just, I mean, especially if their parents are in the Christian world and they're going to church and all those things, like they just want a place to plug in. And why not do this fun thing? You know, the parents are like, yeah, finally you're clicking, like you're finding something that you want to do in the Christian world.
Right. Yeah. So that's how they would come in. And so and then like beside our like product table, we'd have like a merch table or a product table. We also had a littler side table that we called a recruitment table. And so we'd have like applications kids could fill out. An intern or a staff member there that would talk to any interested teens or parents to get them more information and like literature in their hands and stuff. So like it was I mean, they've got it down to a system, how to get kids in.
So I have a question. Were you required to bring in so many kids per convention or per thing? Okay, they didn't have any requirements like.
No, but they did incentivize it. Like if you had an intern, or like if you brought an intern or brought a friend in and they stayed, like they'd discount your tuition so much money or whatever.
Oh, so you still had to pay to go to this?
Yeah, we paid to be abused on the regular.
Okay. I was thinking like you just signed up like a camp.
No.
Okay.
So tuition ranged anywhere between like my first year there, it was $6,500. And I think the high end, I think it got to like almost 11 grand at one point.
And so so if your parents didn't pay for this, the child was made to pay for this, correct? By working jobs within.
Except we're not allowed to work.
What does that mean? Okay.
It means you can't have, so in the beginning, the rules were so strict that like you couldn't have a job outside of being an intern. So you had to believe God for your money, and you had to send out support letters to hopefully help people like would help support you that way. Because you weren't allowed to leave. We weren't even allowed to leave campus. Like we couldn't go off the ranch unless it was like we had to get permission to leave the ranch. Like if we were sitting in a service, I would have to get permission to go to the bathroom. So like it is highly regulated there. Yeah.
Well, that just sucks. I'm just gonna say that really sucks, because young kids are so impressionable when they're coming in, and 90% of the time they just want to please the parent, because we've all been taught that your superiors, like they're supposed to be knowledgeable and have your best interest at heart. Like these are things that we're told, especially if you go into the church setting, like the pastors and the deacons, and I'm really showing my southern side here. But they're supposed to have all of these this knowledge and have your best interest at heart. And and as a kid, you don't see the nefarious things that are going on behind the scenes, because you want to only see the good. And you might not even know what these signs are either, because you've never experienced them or seen them or anything.
For sure. And coupling that with, there's a little bit of truth in everything they're saying. So they're backing up everything they're doing to us with the Bible, definitely taking things out of context and to extremes, but backing it all up with the Bible. So like then us questioning them equals questioning God.
Right.
And which we don't do that, because we don't do that.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's also like you take a young impressionable child or teenager, young adult, and then you have someone who's been in this position for years, who's very comfortable with how they do things, whatever that looks like to them. And then you're coming up against this young, impressionable child, young adult, and
Mhm.
you're expecting this young adult to be able to stand up for them and what's right and their beliefs when this onslaught comes on.
Yeah.
Because these older people, I don't want to say older people, but these more seasoned people within the church, like they know how to bring it.
Yeah.
They know how to talk to people. And plus, if they're narcissistic, which sounds like they are, and
Yeah.
exploiting the um the holes with which they know that they can in a young child,
Mhm.
is, and it's atrocious. Um,
Yeah. It's gross.
so
It's
what
really
is the youngest age that they would bring in interns in? Was it 18 or did they come in
it
at
was
16, 14,
so
12?
18. It's supposed to be an intern, you have to be 18 years old and graduated from high school or have a GED
Okay.
equivalent. And so, but there was exceptions made. Like I know someone that came in at 17 because she had her GED. So she was a minor. And so there's that. But I think we're getting to like statute of limitation stuff because there's people like my psychologist has told me, like, you have a winnable court case. Like if I ever wanted to like sue them,
Right.
which I'm not gonna do because it's just not something I'm
That would
comfortable
be
with.
a whole lot because they would probably come at you with full fire,
Yeah, yeah. Um, and so it's just not something I'm willing to do or want to rehash, because I don't feel like it would bring me closure. And that's why I feel like I would want to do that. But
Well, I don't
um,
know that it would necessarily need to bring you closure, but it could also bring awareness as well.
yeah.
That's the
So
other avenue. But again,
yeah,
it's, that's a big deal.
yeah, a really
Like,
big thing. So yeah, they're supposed to be 18, but one came at 17. We had another girl come at 16 because she had her GED, and that's the youngest intern to my knowledge. That 16-year-old is still there now.
wow.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I think she might have just hit 30.
Okay. So she's been there for 14 years.
Yeah. Yep.
And I suppose with each year that passes by, it's harder and harder to get out
Yeah. Yes.
because you build
Because,
connections in there still. I'm sure you had friends in there, right? Or at
yeah.
least people you thought were friends.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and now that I've been seeing a psychologist, like trauma bond, like trauma bonding
Yes,
is a real thing.
it is a real
Um,
thing.
yeah. So there's, as far as the people that are still on the inside, there's maybe like one couple that I'd want to see out of there. Otherwise, oh, everyone that I was like, please get out, please get out, please get out, like praying for them, like get out of there. They're out of there.
Oh,
And so,
good.
yep. So I'm really thankful. I'm so thankful. So yeah, and I don't know that these people that are still in there will ever leave. Um, I wish they would, but I don't think they will.
Right.
Hmm.
So talk to me about like the emotional impact that this has had on you. I know you've mentioned that you see a psychologist.
Yeah.
Talk to me about this emotional like roller coaster ride that you're on, like the first few days of you getting out. Like tell me about that so I can emotionally see like
Yeah.
the roller coaster that it's hitting on
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So I left September 11th, oddly enough, and I remember because it's September 11th, but
Yeah.
2019. Um, my brother bought me a bus ticket because Go held my paycheck and wasn't giving it to me. And my paycheck at that time, like I was getting paid less than $300 a month for working sun up to sundown
Right.
24/7.
Slave labor.
Yeah, less than. Like to put
Yeah.
it in, I didn't even realize that until Lacey took me to see The Help with her. Like when it first came out, the movie The Help, and I realized that the main character was getting paid more than I was getting paid. And this was like, I was like,
Right.
hold on a second,
Wait a second here.
hold on. Yeah. So ridiculous, right? Like that is ridiculous. To put that into perspective, like once I finally was out, I got a job as a nanny for like an amazing family, and that was so healing. And I made more in one day there than I did in
Yeah.
a month at
I'll
Go.
say a nanny's a hard job. It's a
Yeah,
hard job.
yeah,
I just know from having kids of my own, it's hard as a mom.
right. Yeah. So September 11th, 2019, my brother buys me a Greyhound bus ticket because I have $0 in my bank account because my paycheck magically didn't go through. Right. And that's the first time that's ever happened in my whole
Right.
entire time there. And it still took them like 3 weeks after I got out before that finally kicked into my account.
Mm.
Yeah. And so it was just messed up. But and he had a taxi cab on standby. He's like, Kathy, I'm gonna call you a cab in case they won't bring you. I'm like, they're gonna bring me because I still don't even realize like if they're bad yet.
Okay.
I had like if stuff was feeling yucky, and like the day before I left, there was an incident where they had all the interns on the line running and they called all the leaders out to do like up downs in front of the interns doing up downs or whatever. I'm wearing like Birkenstocks and leggings and like this like light pink blushy colored like cashmere sweater. I'm like, I'm not doing up downs in the mud right now. I'm not even a leader for these guys next year. Like, I'm not doing that. But then I got yelled at to come to the line. So I kicked off my Birks and I'm like, well, I guess I'm took off my sweater. So I was just in my tank top under it. And I go and I start doing up downs in the wet mud and I slip and I catch all of my body weight on one arm. And I'm freaking out that I'm shaking, I'm like in shock. And I get out of the line at that point and go stand by the golf cart. And afterwards, Lacey comes up to me and she goes, what are you doing? I'm like, I think I might have broke my arm. Like, that's why I got out of there. And she's like, Kathy, I just really need to tell you this. Like, your weight is your biggest obstacle in the way of the call of God on your life. And I had to say, yes, ma'am, thank you. And she walked away. Like, we had to say thank you for all of our abuse. Like, if we didn't thank them for correction or what they thought, we were in more trouble. So like at that point, I was like, maybe this isn't a great place. And I was like, okay, I'm ready to go for real now. So that was probably my first cue into like, that was really hurtful, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because before, had you just numbed yourself to like the comments that she would make or they would
Yeah,
make?
I've never come at my weight like that before.
Okay.
So it was like just really surprising that way. Anyways. Yeah, so like shocking that she would come at me that way, but she did. And so I'm kind of glad she did because that was kind of like the first little crack
Yeah.
in the wall, or like for me to kind of see what was actually going on there.
And
So
how old were you about that time?
I was 30-ish,
Okay.
over 30. Yeah, maybe 31. When that happened. So when I'm getting out, and so mind you, I've been there since I was 18. So whatever that looks like, yeah, 32 then, almost 32. Yeah, so wild. And so I got on a Greyhound bus and Greyhounded it back to Minnesota. And the whole way back just felt so surreal and just strange that I didn't have a schedule I was supposed to follow. I didn't have anybody to tell me what to do. It just felt it felt wrong almost.
Right.
And then I moved in with my brother Roger because I was going to help him, or I did help him with his 3 kiddos at the time. That was the plan. I was going to move in with him, help with his kiddos. It was a safe place for me to be, where I could just kind of chill out. And I didn't realize how much I needed that until I needed that, right? A
Right.
safe place to land. And so he started talking to me a little bit about stuff, and I was just like, Go is amazing. Like, I still love them, like all of these things. Still talking with Josh and Lacey quite a bit. And then so stuff I didn't even realize. So emotionally, I'm still in like survival mode, right?
Right.
Like I'm in total like appease. I'm still stuck in appease. So like flight, fright, freeze, appease, or some people call it fawn, right? I'm still just stuck in appease or stuck in please. Like I'm just going to please and appease my way through life because that's all I know how to do, and that's how I stay safe. That's why I protect Kathy. And so I'm like, Roger, can you like write me a schedule of what you need me to do? He's like, no. I was like, can you make me a to-do list of stuff you want me to do around the house? He's like, I'm not your boss. He's like, take a nap. Like that's on your to-do list.
Good
I'm
for
like,
him. I love
right?
that.
Yeah, but I was like, I realized he's like, Kathy, you're 32 years old or 30 whatever years old, would have been 31, I think, years old. You do not need a list of stuff to do. Like you can make your own decisions. And I sat there and I realized, and I started crying at that point. I was like, I don't know how to do that.
Right,
Like
because you've never been taught that.
I'm a full-fledged grown-up, supposed to be a full-fledged adult, and have no idea what like a normal day in the life of a grown-up should look like. Because I'm used to like every minute of my day being planned out for me and micromanaged. And I was like, whoa, this is weird. Um, and so I stuff just felt so strange and it just felt
Out of
um
place, I bet.
it felt almost too big. Like I felt like I had too much room. I had too many
Right.
options. Um, it was just so overwhelming feeling because I was like, hold on, hold on, hold on. Like, no, 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 someone tell me what to do. Like this will be, I just don't know what to do. Someone just tell me what to do. Um,
So it's almost like, so when you're saying that right there, like there's the prison studies where they've got people that are in prison for, 10, 15, 20 years and they get out, they have no idea what to do because their life has always been managed for them. They know exactly when they're supposed to go to bed, exactly when they're supposed to go out to eat, exactly when this. And so a lot of them will commit crimes to go back in because it's a safe space for them.
yeah,
They know exactly what is expected of them every second of every day. But
yep,
out in the big world, they have no clue.
yeah,
There's
it's hard to
so many
function.
options. It's
It,
overwhelming.
it's literally crippling.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah. And so just I was just trying to like navigate my way through that. And I went to a church service. Um, it was on Mother's Day, oddly enough. But the preacher was talking about like to check the lights on your heart, like how we would like check engine lights on a car or like oil, like just take an inventory of your heart. And if there's a light coming on, like, God wants to take care of that basically. And so on the way home from that service, was like, prayed this very innocent prayer. Like, what about my heart? God, like, what do I need to take care of in my heart? And it was literally like a rush of repressed memories came back
Oh,
from stuff.
wow.
Um, and some stuff I was just like, oh my gosh. And so I felt like my whole life was like a lie at that point, or at least the last my 12 years ago. I was like, oh my gosh, like, and I didn't, and so I had that feeling coupled with like, hold on, I'm not supposed to feel bad feelings about these people, so
Oh,
it was really confusing and hard. And literally I just started crying and I was like so overwhelmed by that I was literally ready to, in Monticello, that overpass, I think it's like 193 or whatever.
mhm.
Um, I was ready to drive off that overpass. Like that was my plan. Like I was literally going to kill myself. Um, I
Because
was,
of these emotions and feelings that you didn't know
I
how to
didn't,
handle and
yeah,
process.
I
Okay.
didn't know how to feel. Like
It's
I had,
intense. Yeah.
yeah. So like, um, wow, I didn't expect that to be emotional. And it's probably emotional for this reason. I was following so close behind the semi that I missed it, that I couldn't drive off. And so I actually got off on that exit and I just parked in the parking lot and I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried. And I called one of my friends and thank God he answered. Um, and he just talked me down. He's like, you know what? He's like, that's a lot. He's like, that's really valid. I can understand why you would feel that way. And just
Yeah.
that validation was enough for me to go like, oh my gosh.
Because at
And
that
so
moment you feel crazy, don't you?
so crazy. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
it's like, you've been told to not ever have a bad feeling about them ever, and then I'm having bad feelings, and then you're also taught and go like those bad feelings, like it's probably the devil. So I'm like, oh my God, am I like possessed by the
I'm
devil?
possessed. Yeah.
Like all of these crazy things. And so after that, what's wild is on that Sunday, the worship pastor at that church at the time was like, hey, you want to have coffee with me on Wednesday? I was like, sure, we can have coffee on Wednesday. So Sunday this happens. I don't even go back to my brother Roger's house. I drive straight to my parents' house. after that. I'm just crying. And I'm like, can I just go take a bath downstairs? And they're like, what is happening? Like, I'm trying to look like a crazy person. I'm just like, I just need to go sit in the tub because water is
Mhm.
grounding and so safe to me. Um, and so I sat in there. I don't know how long. I don't know how long I was in the bathtub, just like crying. But there was such release in that, just like getting that
Yeah.
initial, like, okay, and so I come out of the bathroom.
Floodgates were opening.
Yeah. I don't know how long it took me to come out of the bathroom. I just know it was a long time, long enough for like my dad to come down and knock a few times. He's like, "Are you still good?" I'm like, "No, but yeah." He's like, "That's fine. If you need anything, let us know." Um, and so that's the first time they had ever seen me like distraught like that. I was like distraught. Um,
Sure.
yeah. And so I was just like, I don't want to talk about it, but I was just had a lot going on, and they're like, "It's fine. You don't have to tell us anything." They're like, do you want a hug right now?" I'm like, "Yeah, hug would be good now." Because I like didn't even want them to touch me when I first got there. I was like, "Don't touch me, don't touch me. I just want to be alone." Um, and so that happened. And then so that was on Sunday. And then on Wednesday, I go to coffee, right, with the worship pastor at the time, and who is now my pastor. So I attend their church right now. Um, And so he's like, "You know what?" He's like, "I feel like it might be good for you." And we just talked not even a lot about go. I didn't bring up the fact that I just almost killed myself on Sunday leaving church. Like, just was like, "Yeah, go was kind of hard." And that's all I said. Go was kind of hard, I think.
Mhm.
And he's like, "Yeah, I feel like you might have, it might be good for you to talk to this lady." He handed me a business card. And then he said these words. He's like, "She's kind of a mental Jedi." I'm like, "You had me at mental Jedi, Brandon."
Right.
And so I called her, and she sent me intake paperwork, and it took me forever to fill it out.
And this is in
Because
2022, correct?
it would have still been 2021. Like it was,
2021. Okay.
well, maybe not September, October, November. No, it would have been 2022 then. When is Mother's Day? I don't know. Time is
It's
so
in
weird.
May. It's in May.
So it would have been 2022.
Okay.
Um, right?
Well, you got out
Nope.
September 11th of 19
Yeah. So it was that same year.
before you
So
got out of Go?
nope. So it would have been after. So October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. So it would have been 2020.
2020. Okay.
Yeah, 2020. Um, and so I started seeing her. So it took me a long time to fill out the paperwork because I was like, I think I might have been in a cult. Like at that point, I was like, I had watched all of Scientology in the Aftermath by Leah Remini, and I was like, holy crap, a lot of this is just like go.
Right.
But it was also very therapeutic for me because I was like, holy crap, a lot of this was like go. So maybe I'm not as crazy kind of as I thought. There was some other people who had also come out of Go that are in the state of Minnesota that talked to me a bit about how like, yep, it was messed up, huh? I'm like, yeah, it was messed up. And so that was helpful kind of in the meantime. But then I started having sessions with my psychologist, who is indeed a mental Jedi. I agree with Brandon.
Good.
And so that is kind of the starting point of like, I guess, emotional healing. Because we realized like from the time I was tiny, like in my family of origin until then, had never even been taught how to properly like process, name, or handle emotions. So like you see those feelings wheels, like that was my best friend. Because I was like, I don't even know what feelings are, or like how these are affecting or impacting my body. And so in the beginning, it was a lot of titration. And am I saying that right? Where it's like we did just a tiny little bit at a time. So that's like, it's like a chemistry term.
Okay.
But it's also in like the field of psychology used when you can only do things a tiny little bit at a time, or else they're too overwhelming and can send you
Yeah.
into crisis, which I was so fragile. And
Yeah.
that's because I literally had like no framework for anything, like emotions, nope, how to be a grown up, nope, how to process questions or anything on my own, nope. Like I was used to even asking Lacey, like, hey, is this outfit okay for me to wear today? Like, is this a good outfit? Like, getting dressed in the morning I couldn't do on my own, so like was really, really dependent, heavily dependent on that really toxic system. And
Yeah.
so I start building a framework. And so that titration, like taking it a little bit at a time, what felt safe, like one little drop instead of like a whole bunch. And I had explained it to Sarah, who's my psychologist, this way, like, I'm scared if I start to like pull on the little piece of yarn that we're pulling on, like it's all going to unravel and I'm just not going to know what to do. And she's like, it's my job to make sure that doesn't happen. And so that
Right.
was reassuring. And I know a lot of people don't find, this is something I would encourage like listeners with, like a lot of people don't find like the right fit right away and getting
Yeah.
professional help, but it is worth finding the right person. Just so happened Sarah was the right one right off the bat, which is not super common. Like it's really common to have to try a few before you really land with one that connects with you. That's been the
Right.
experience of almost all of my friends, is that they've needed to try more than one before they felt like, yeah, I can really like click with this person. Definitely worth finding someone who you click with, who feels safe. But yeah, so that was a huge part of my healing, was getting in touch with Sarah and starting to get information like the science behind why my body was responding to things the way it was responding, because that took it out of the spooky pooky like spiritual realm stuff, which
Right.
is where like my whole life had been lived, and into like, okay, this is literally the science behind what is going on. Like you have PTSD, so this
Right.
is why your body is responding this way. Like, oh, that makes so much sense. And so then just having the vocabulary to even put words to things, which I didn't have before,
Right.
made even just that made things easier, or just knowing like, I don't know, like a window of tolerance. Like I had no idea what that was. But knowing that that exists helps me make decisions on the daily now, like saying yes or saying no to things to keep myself in my window, you
Right.
know. Whereas like I was never taught that. Like I was not allowed to say no. Like no was never an option. So I was living my
I
life
think,
like
nope, go
all the
ahead.
way out. I was living my life all the way out of the top of my window because I didn't
Right.
say no to things.
I
Hmm.
think that is pretty common though with young children, is like not saying no because you're not supposed to tell your parents no.
Yeah.
Like even in my, I mean, my household was a little bit different. I was on the complete, I think, other end of the spectrum, or
Mhm.
maybe not on the other end of the spectrum. Like we just moved a lot. Um,
Yeah.
but my parents were very open. I could go to church if I chose to. I didn't have to. Like they did instill morals and a moral compass within me, and that
Mhm.
empathetic nature for other people. But it wasn't like I wasn't forced to do anything. I wasn't forced to go to church. I wasn't forced to do, things of that nature. I mean,
Yeah.
the only thing we were forced to do was at the dinner table. We had to mind our manners at the dinner table. Otherwise, my father had a fork. And if you weren't paying attention, he'd smack your knuckles with the fork. But that was very rare. It was very few and in between.
Yeah.
And that was more along the lines of, hey, don't, talk and eat with stuff or talk with stuff falling out of
Yeah.
your mouth,
Yeah.
just good correction manners there.
Yeah.
Um, but it was, yeah. So going from like my wild childhood that I call it, like my father was a criminal, like I remember running through the swamps with him on a job heist, like
Oh
all
my
things
gosh.
of this nature.
Yeah.
Um, but I was free to make the decisions that I wanted to. But still being a young child, it's like you don't want to say no. It's hard to say
Mhm.
no,
Yeah.
especially when you're trying to please somebody.
Yep.
Whether you think you are or not,
Right.
most children are trying to please somebody,
Mhm.
teenagers, people in
Yeah.
general. There's someone that you're answering to and someone that you're trying to please. And so
Right.
it's hard to say no.
Yeah. And so that comes from literally being stuck in a peas response, like trauma response. So like from the time I was very little. So it was
Yeah.
just so crazy to be like, nope. Telling people like, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that today. And like that being enough. Like I didn't have to over explain it. I didn't have to go
Yeah.
into details. Because over explaining things is another sign that you've been through like narcissistic abuse. And so learning that I don't need to do that. so just I've learned so much from Sarah and how to like name my emotions and how I can handle them, like how I can ground myself when I do have a PTSD trigger, because those do still happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how to like get myself back to reality, which is good. And so
Yeah.
all of those things have kind of led into the season I'm in now, which is like my 2023 has been rough. Started out with a bang. I got pink eye, and then I totaled my car,
Oh.
right, with my kid in the car.
Oh
Um,
no.
yeah, we are both safe, thank God.
Yeah.
And like rounded that out with the flu. So just yucky, right? So I posted that on January 30th, on my socials or whatever. I was like, okay, sometimes life looks like this or like this or like this. Then it's like, promise I'm gonna crush it next week. I'm just probably gonna take a nap first.
Mm-hmm.
And then fast forward to January 31st, I get a call from my dad, and he's like, you need to call mom. And I'm like, he's like, you need to calm her down. The nurses say she's like having a panic attack. Can you just call and do some breathing with her? Because he knows I do breath work to calm my body. I was like,
Yeah.
I was home because I had pink eye and the flu. I was like, sure, I can do that. So I FaceTime her, and she doesn't look very normal, and she's having a really hard time breathing. And I'm like, okay, mom. And at this point in time, she was in a transitional care facility because she had had a total hip replacement. And so that's where she was. And so, because she needed more help than my dad could give her at home. And so, so she's in this transitional care facility. I'm FaceTiming her. We're taking deep breaths. She's calmed down a lot. And I was talking with her the whole time my dad was on his way there. And he lives about an hour away. And so from the transitional care facility. So he's coming from about an hour away. So I had her on the phone almost like close to 50 minutes, FaceTiming her, like doing some deep breathing. Nurses are taking her vitals and she looks fine. My dad gets there and he's like, okay, I'm here. I'm like, okay, and then I'm like, okay, mom, I'm leaving you in like the very capable hands of like dad. I was like, call me if he gets out of hand, like joking, just told her like how much I loved her. And she said, love you too, Kathy. Thanks for calling, you know. And then I get a text from my dad. He's like, things aren't good. And then he sends me a picture of my mom on the floor in the bathroom of her place, like in the bathroom of the transitional care facility.
Right.
And I call him right away. I'm like, I'm like, she just had a hip replacement. So hip replacement on the floor equals probably not. I'm thinking she's like, really, something is not right. And he's like, it's not good, Kathy. It's not good, Kathy. I can hear them doing CPR in the background. Um,
Oh.
yeah. And so I'm literally on the phone with my dad as she's like coding and they pronounce her dead. um, no one was expecting that.
Right.
It was really hard, um, just to hear that on the
Yeah.
phone. Um, really rough. And um, I was like, oh my gosh, dad. He's like, I gotta go. I'm like, okay. And then at that point, I was like, I don't care if I have the flu. I don't care if I have pink eye. I'm going to go help my dad, you know? So I double masked and said, nobody touch my eye. Let me in there. And so I was just there with my dad when we were like, had to make a police report and talk to the police and all the things. And just no one was expecting that to happen that day. Like we had just talked about how excited she was, the FaceTime in for Zeke's birthday party, which was like the next weekend. Um, and so it was just like so unexpected.
Yeah.
Um, and so rough and so hard. And like with that whole process, like I had to, like, I planned the funeral, I wrote her obituary. I'm the only one from our family who spoke at the funeral, because everyone else is like, we can't.
It's
Which
hard.
again, it's so
Yeah.
hard. But thankfully, I don't know, thankfully, not thankfully, because of Go, I was able to almost like disassociate a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
um, in a healthy way. And disassociation, like all the time, not a safe plan.
Right.
But
Right.
in that moment, it really kept me safe and able to like manage everything that got thrown on my plate. Um,
Right. Probably
And
kept you from spiraling backward into everything that had happened. Because
yeah,
had you, because you talked about your rough childhood with your mom and your dad, had you been mending that
yeah,
rift with them? Okay.
yeah. So I had never had a bad relationship with my dad. Like we had been good and tight since I was little. Like even when I was in the cult, he just made it a point to make sure that I was doing okay.
Hmm.
Um, but with my mom, really once I had Zeke. So I've got Zeke, he's 2.5. He is wild child and I love him. um, but once I had Zeke, I my mom's memory had been starting to slip a little bit and I didn't want her to forget him. And so we FaceTimed every night. And
Okay.
so it wasn't really about making a relationship, um, her and I so much as I wanted her to remember Zeke, um, and to be able to have that with him. And so we would just FaceTime every night at dinner and she would like sing songs at him and um just do silly things and he would ask like I call grandma. I'm like we'll call grandma um and stuff. And so in that way it was better. And after I started doing all my putting in all my work with Sarah,
Yeah.
I was like I probably need to have some conversations with my mom. And
Yeah.
so never like I'll write out had a conversation about like, hey, like what you did was really crappy in my childhood.
Right.
I was just like, you know what, moving forward, I just really need some boundaries. And that's gonna look
Yeah.
like I am in charge of what I allow in. You basically
Yeah.
like um like if you're speaking to me in like this manner or whatever, like will be done, you know. Um I need to keep myself safe. And like what you're saying to me right now is not safe, stuff like that. Or being able to tell her, that's none of your business. And I don't have the rights to that information, stuff
Yeah.
like that. So I'd say she had grown a lot in like the last 2 years, since Zeke, um, which was really cool. And I'm glad that it happened that way. And I'm glad I got out and home and was able to kind of have that time with her. Like her kids and grandkids were like the light of her life. And so she like was so excited for this summer because she had gotten a sandbox and she was getting that already. And she had like bubbles and sidewalk chalk on ready to go for this summer.
Oh,
That was really sad. But so that's the kind of grandma she was, like retired, was just so looking forward to having like the best summer ever with her kids. She loved gardening, always had like a giant garden. And so we'd go get, grandma's veggies
oh,
from her.
good.
Yeah. So we had been mending it. And I'm thankful that that got to happen that way. Um, and it wasn't, uh, I wouldn't say like I got like she didn't apologize for all the garbage she put me through,
Sure.
but I also wasn't looking for that. Um, I
Right.
didn't feel like I really needed that to move forward because I knew that she'd have like limited access. Does that make sense to
Yep.
my life? And I was gonna be like, I wasn't gonna tell her that, like, okay, you can have like up to here with me. You
Hmm.
know, I just kept it very cordial and light, and we didn't dig deep into like deep life things really. But that was okay. It worked for us to just be like on that surface level of like, yep, did this today. It was super fun. Good to talk to you. What did you do today?
Yeah.
Um, and so, but then, would call her with any and every cooking question or craft question. I'm like, oh my God, Zeke just did this. What do I do? Like, question, you know. Um, so it was really nice to have that while she was here. Um,
That's good. Like it's
yeah.
nice that coming from where you started with her to be able to have that level of communication and that level of trust, because it always comes down to trust.
Hmm.
Like trust that they're not going to betray you
Yeah.
or, and I don't know, almost like put you on edge or whatever it is that sets you off,
Yeah.
whatever those triggers are.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. That's why we kept it. I just had very firm boundaries that I didn't even really like tell her, like, hey, that's a hard boundary. I would just steer
yeah,
it to manage my boundary, to keep my boundary, because that's my job, right? As a grown up to manage my
right.
boundary. Um, and so that was hard. So that was the 31st, January 31st of this year. She passed. Um, None of us were expecting it. All of us were it was hard, really, really
Yeah.
hard. Um, and then and then within from that until um so February and March, I lost two more family friends.
Oh, wow.
Um, one to suicide and one to stroke complications. And she was young. She was like not even 50 yet.
Oh, wow.
Um, the one that had the stroke. Um, so there was that. And then kind of capped out with my grandma, my mom's mom, passing away. So it's like four deaths, like boom, 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 boom. So 2023 has been a rough start of things. Um, and then my most recent loss was actually just past Friday. I made like the final call to my dad because he has done
Oh,
some, yeah, so that was one that blindsided me again. So that's like really matchy to like the go situation. Um because it feels again like someone who I like knew and loved and trusted
yeah.
turned out to be a really unsafe person. Um just in the choices he's making. And so I had to put up that boundary with him. And so um that's like the most recent loss I'd say for this year. And probably the hardest, if I'm being really honest, because he's picking it. um,
Right. Well,
but
because if you had a great relationship with your father, it's always hard to put that boundary in place with someone that you've always had a great relationship with.
yeah. And so, I mean, it's just been really rough, just the way he's like treated us since my mom has passed. Um, because it's like he's a whole different human, uh,
Right.
but he doesn't see it that way. And um, like I literally like wrote out 2 pages front and back of like the things I wanted to talk to him about before I like made this really final decision that obviously wasn't like happy about. Um,
Right.
basically like poured my guts out to him like, hey, I was triggered and crying and talking to you about this, and you laughed in my face and said I was being ridiculous. Like that really hurt. Pause for a response, pause for a response, nothing, like crickets, radio silence. I'm like, okay. So I moved on to the next point. So again, he did that for 2 pages front and back and didn't say a word. And then at the end, he was just like, okay. I'm like, okay. I was like, just so you know, I don't wish you any ill will. Like, I hope you have a really super happy life. Zeke and I just can't be a part of it. Like, I would be setting a bad example for my son to allow someone in our life that is continually hurting us, like willingly, and not owning those actions or trying to like repair those actions or change them. So I'm like, I'm sorry, but that's what it's what it's gonna be. And so he's
So
like, I
it's
guess we're done.
doing,
I
so
guess
is
we're
this
done.
looking like mental manipulation and stuff?
Yep, yeah. So like
Okay.
or I think crazy baiting even is what my psychologist called it. It's like that's
Oh,
like
I
crazy.
don't even know what that is.
Yeah, crazy baiting. So like when my response or when someone's response is like so emotionally escalated and the other person plays it way down, like cool, calm, and collected, it leads into all the questioning again. Like, am I crazy? I must be the crazy one because I'm up here and they're like down here. So I'm
Right.
crazy.
Okay.
And so that, again, that plays right into everything I dealt with coming out of Go.
Yeah.
Um, and so at the end of that conversation, he just said, I guess we're done then. I said, yep. And he hung up. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
yeah. So it was really hard and really fresh just last Friday. So a few days ago.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And so still processing that, but in that, like you, so like that titration, like taking it in the drops that feel manageable. And so I guess that's kind of how like moving forward things are going. Um, and so I don't know, just you can go through a whole lot of things and still find the silver lining. Like I have the opportunity now to like raise my kiddo in a way where he's like an empathetic, helpful human. Like I had a whole conversation with one of my sisters about how Zeke is more emotionally intelligent than my dad at 2.5. Like he'll say like, mommy, you have big feelings, need a hug, like sweet things like,
Oh,
and like we talk about his big feelings. So like are able to like communicate. And I don't ever want him to feel bad for having feelings. Like that's,
Yeah.
and so the other day he goes, Mom, I like my big feelings. I'm like, good for you, buddy. So he's
Oh my
just
gosh, he sounds delightful.
It's really fun. He's a hoot and a half. Or like the silver lining of now I don't have to wonder, like, does my dad care? Doesn't he care? Like, will it get better? Won't it get better? Well, I've made the decision to move on with my life in a way that is safe and productive. And I can move on with people that are caring and not toxic manipulators.
Right.
And I'm so lucky to have a community full of those kinds of people you know and siblings that are supportive of my decision and aren't like disowning me because I'm no longer talking to my dad.
Right.
um
Because
Stuff
you
like
can
that.
have opposing viewpoints and not like cut the situation out, or cut the person off. Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
find it ridiculous these days that people cannot have an opposing viewpoint. They're expected to believe the same exact thing as everyone else in this world. And it's
it's
that
not
is
real.
very extremely toxic because now you're just going with the flow and everything's okay.
Yeah,
It's not how it should be. It's
yeah.
like if you have questions, you should be able to voice them and say, hey,
Mhm.
this is an issue for me. How can we deal with this going forward? And
Yep,
if that person's not willing to deal with it, then yeah, you have every right to cut them out of your life or to move on or do whatever it is that is safe
yeah.
and healthy for you
Hmm.
to process and do life, because it's your
Yeah,
life.
exactly. And so I guess I just can't stress enough like the importance of like getting professional help. Like it is a game changer and it was what I needed to get like the tools I needed to not only navigate out of the crazy maze that was coming out of Go, but now everything that 2023 has dealt me. So I am going into like now navigating this loss with my dad and
Mhm.
continuing to grieve the loss of my mom, but with so many more tools than I
Yeah.
had in 2020, navigating like Go. So it was like now it was like grieving not just like 12 years of time, but like a whole belief system I
Yeah.
had to figure out. So like just grieving all kinds of things like that, friendships that I had lost because of my time in Go.
Yeah.
um you know so it's just I cannot stress enough the importance of like getting professional help. There's resources that are
Yeah.
available. Um, like online ones, like if seeing someone in person feels like too scary of a first step. Sometimes seeing someone online is feels a little safer. Some people will do over the phone.
Mhm.
If seeing someone face to face feels a little bit too much like it's in your business.
Right.
Um, there's ways to just start. And if it seems big and daunting and scary, that's really valid because it is big and daunting and
Yeah.
scary to try and like navigate through these things. But there are people on this planet who went through a lot of years of schooling to help people get better and will just listen with an open ear and are so extremely helpful. And in doing that, like you can get to a place where you're able to help others too,
Right.
to be that ear, that open ear for someone like, hey, you know what? I don't have all the answers. I'm not a professional, but I can say
Right.
this is what I went through and this is what helped me get through those things. And I just cannot say enough about getting professional help. And I'm thankful that it's starting to get destigmatized less and less and less.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm so thankful for that because it is a total game changer. It is, for me, it was like honestly life and death, I believe. Like
Yeah.
without the tools I've learned from Sarah, I don't think I'd still be around, honestly. And that's hard and a heavy and a big thing to say, but it's a really honest and truthful thing for me
It
to
is.
say. Hmm.
I
And
love
so,
that. It's
yeah.
I agree. Like it's very so I will show my age again. When I grew up, it was extremely stigmatized to see a counselor or a therapist.
Yeah.
And so, and then coupled on top of it with my father, who he didn't really brainwash me, like in the sense that like he was creating an outline like you had to live by, like with
Mhm.
all the parameters, get up this and everything was coordinated for you every day. Mine
Uh-huh.
was he would just talk to me about, okay, you don't write anything down because that's how the authorities will catch you. Like that's how they'll put you in jail, like all of those things. Um,
Uh-huh.
so for me to write a book was a big deal,
Yeah.
a huge deal because I was going against everything my father had said.
Right.
And a lot of people are like, well, yeah, just get over it. I'm like, yeah, but this is
You
the
don't,
thing is that it's
yeah.
not, you don't just get over things. You have to
No.
first understand the issue with it.
Hmm.
And then you have to create like a mini playbook on how to do it. And
Right.
then you can actually do it.
Yeah.
But it was, and so things like that, it wasn't like he was sitting there in my face and yelling and screaming at me because my parents never did that.
Yeah.
But it was just the subtle things that he would say. It's like, yeah, you don't, you don't write anything down because then the cops can, or the lawyers or whatever will use that
Yeah.
against you in the court of law and blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah. And so it took me forever to be able to write things down. This is why
Right.
journaling is so hard for me because you're writing all your thoughts, emotions, and feelings in the journal. And it's like,
Hmm.
well, gosh, that's nothing but fodder for people to use against me. And I'm like, oh,
Right.
it's one of those things. And
Yeah. And
so
the polar opposite and go is we were forced to write everything down.
really,
And if we didn't, we got in major trouble. And so now for me, writing is hard because it's like I feel like, so I'll do voice memos for myself. And
good for
that's how I
you.
can still get stuff out and just finding ways that like help you get through those
Yes.
things. Another really helpful thing for me was a video game I played. It's called Grease, like Gris, and it literally like takes you through the stages of grief, kind of. Um,
Really?
but so yeah, and so you have to understand, like I'm coming from a place when I started playing this that I had no language or vocabulary to explain how I was feeling. I didn't know how to convey that at all. And like just in the opening sequence, I was like, I bawled. I was like, oh my gosh, that's how I feel. And like in playing through I had to take so many breaks because I would just cry and I'm like, that's how I feel. And so
Right.
that's, yeah, so that's a really beautiful game. If there's anybody that likes video games, it's beautifully done. The music is wonderful and the art is really beautiful. And I just really put like a soundtrack and a visual to like, oh my gosh, that's how I feel. Like that's exactly it. And so like to the point of like jumping onto something and then it just disappears out from under you. Or
Mm-hmm.
like you have to like there's a one level where there's like this big angry bird, but to beat it, you have to face it, you know? So like stuff like that. It's just, I don't know. It was just so, that was another thing that was like profound for me was that silly video game. But I love that different things work for different people. And that
Yeah,
was one
building your
thing that,
toolbox.
yep, was really able to so much so that my psychologist like bought the game and played through it. She's like, I need to see this game.
Yeah, I'm super intrigued. I don't play video games at all.
Yeah,
But I'm super intrigued by it. Like I would love
yeah,
for my kids to go through it because,
yeah,
they lost their sister. It would
yeah,
be maybe help them quite a bit to understand their
yeah,
feelings and what they're going through and all those
yeah.
things.
You can even watch like they have full playthroughs on the internet that you can just watch someone play
Okay.
to on YouTube. Yeah. And so that was like a really cool building block. And then finding like podcasts and stuff
Hmm.
that really resonate with me and help me learn things. So for me, like a little bit culty is like I love it. It's my number one favorite podcast of all time. They
And
have
that's
like
the name of it? Hold on,
a
that's the name
little,
of it?
yep, the name of it is A Little Bit Culty.
Oh, wow. I like the name of that.
Yeah. And so
Okay.
it's by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames, and they are survivors of Nexium and
Okay.
with Raniere. And so um and so it was just, sorry, I laugh every time I say his name because I just picture this short little guy playing volleyball. Anyways, so I watched, so they were on The Vow seasons 1 and 2. Um and also they started this podcast, A Little Bit Culty. So they are not only survivors in their own right, but they have um, done a tremendous amount of healing work themselves, and they have on experts, survivors,
I love that.
doctors, and professionals. So really, the whole gambit when it comes to anything that's like a little bit culty. And so
Yeah.
so that's been really helpful for me, because their sources are well vetted, they're well supported. I know it's just they're not just talking like nonsense.
Right. Right.
Um, yeah, and so they also have like on their website, a little bit culty, they've got like a list of resources for cult survivors. Um, and so that's been really helpful, like books that have been helpful for people to read. They get people in connection with like the Stephen Hassan network. And so he is the one who made up the bite model to identify like the areas of coercive control and cults. Uh,
Okay.
and so, which if you look it up, it's crazy because Go has done all of them except kill someone. And that's only if you like fudge the rules a little bit, because like people have died in Go because they refused to get medical attention because Go said they shouldn't. So
Mm.
it's like, even that one's like a little like maybe it could be.
Right.
So it's like if it looks like a duck and sounds like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And so
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I was like, wow, Go as a cult. And my psychologist was like, yeah, because all the earmarks marks of a cult. I'm like, does. um,
You're
but
like,
yeah,
oh my gosh, it does.
yeah. So, but yeah, listening to a little bit culty and watching like different cult documentaries has been so helpful. Because like I had mentioned before, like once you've been in one, you are so like you're so statistically more inclined to go back to
Yeah.
one.
Or
And
to
like,
fall into another one, I would say, because
yep,
it's similar but different.
yeah, they call it cult hopping. Like that's really a normal thing to do.
Okay.
Um, which I find it interesting that cult hopping and church hopping sound a little alike. Anyway,
Hmm.
um,
Anyway,
just throw that in there.
that's a
Um,
topic for another day.
right. Um, but yeah, so I'm like, never again will I let myself be subjected to that kind of coercive control. And it honestly became a lot easier for me once I had Zeke because it wasn't just me, it's now me
Right.
and him.
And you
And
have
so
to
it's,
protect him. Yeah.
yep. And so that really was just a whole new level of like, okay, you know what? Like if I can't do it for myself, which I should be able to, but sometimes that's really hard.
It is.
Um, I can definitely do it for him. And so, yeah, so that's what I would have to say, I guess. Just professional help is so extremely helpful. And then those podcasts and some books that I've read from that list of stuff on their site has been so helpful.
I am just astounded with the courage that you've had to even get out. Because when you were here, like I had no idea of anything that was going on. You were open with how you had a nanny family, that you were a nanny for a family, and all of that stuff. But with all the other stuff, like I could tell there was a difference and you were secretive about some things.
Uh,
More open with other things. But I was never ever going to pry. It was like that was none of my business.
yeah,
And just trying to be there for you if you needed someone. And
yeah,
plus, my daughter absolutely loved you. And
yeah.
I told her I was having this podcast and she's like, oh my gosh, tell her I
She's
said
so sweet.
hi.
Yeah,
So she says hi.
I say hi
Um,
back.
but it's just so interesting. Like you see people, but do you really see people?
Right.
Are you actually paying attention to the cues that they are giving, the
Mhm.
signs that they're emitting? Even though they don't think that they are, everyone is still emitting something.
Yeah.
Whether it's with a look, an act, or how they word things, how they phrase things, what they do,
Mhm.
what they don't do, all of those things. And we never really know what battles they're struggling with. Like I
Yeah.
would have never known the depth of that. And to me, growing up, I always just thought church was a cult. Just that was
Yeah.
the thing.
Yep.
Um, but I met my husband and he was raised Catholic. And then when he turned 18, he went to Lutheran. Um, and then he just stopped going because I didn't go to church.
Mhm.
Um, and so my uncle had talked to my husband about going into this church that where
Mhm.
I met you at.
Yeah.
All right, that's fine. Whatever. I'll go. If you want me to go, I'll go. Whatever. We're
Yeah.
married. We'll do this as a couple, blah, blah, blah. So we
Yeah.
started going. Well, my husband works tons and tons of hours. And so it ended up being me going all the time. And I told him, and I remember distinctly asking him this question. I said, "Are you good with this church or are you not?"
Hmm.
He was like, "Yeah, why?" I said, "Because I will either be in the church or I won't be in the church. There's no medium ground for me. I'm not just going to go on a Sunday casually, like I'm going to volunteer my time. I'm going to go into this." And so
Hmm.
I did. I started
Yeah.
volunteering my time and I realized I was volunteering my time more there than a job.
Yep.
And so it came to the point where all of a sudden I went and I got a job, like a different job, so that I could not be there as much because it
Yeah.
was starting to affect me. I felt like such a horrible person because of the sermons that were coming out. And it was like almost like belittling me because I don't have a great enough connection with God.
Uh-huh.
I need to go through you.
Yeah.
That's not how it should be in my book, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
believe that we all have the divine connection within
Hmm.
ourselves, and we have to just foster that and create that. And if you don't think of God as think of it as God, whatever, then the creator, the universe,
Yep.
whatever it is, there's a
Yeah.
greater thing out there that is sustaining all this life form.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be God. It absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree.
But
I
that
really
was
do.
my feelings when I went there and I stopped and there I started seeing some signs and I pulled way back and it was with the whole painting of the dang room.
Oh my gosh.
The biggest,
Oh my god.
the biggest ordeal ever. And
Ridiculous. Oh my gosh. I
and
forgot about that.
yes. But then there was also the time that we had lost my daughter and we invited the pastor and his wife over to we thought, well, maybe this will help the children, right? They can talk to the
Yeah.
children, help them kind of through this unexpected loss that we now have. Like their sibling is now gone, they cannot talk to her anymore. So
Yeah.
I invited them over and the pastor's wife looked at me and I'll never forget this. I wrote in emails about this, I wrote in blog posts about this. She looked at me and she's like, "I know this just happened, but you need to move on." And like this literally just happened and it was at that moment I severed all ties with them. I'm like,
Yeah.
"You do not get to have that say in my life. You do not get to
No.
have that. And this should never be uttered to anyone,
No.
ever.
I'm so
Even if
sorry.
it's 50 years down the road, like everyone processes their grief when they're ready to. Like people
Right.
get stuck in a rut um, because they don't have the tools and the means necessary to move forward.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
that's what this whole podcast is for, is to help
Yeah.
people, give them ideas like what is it, the Grease,
Yeah.
GRIS game? Like that's
Yeah.
something I've never even heard of or thought of. Like
Yeah.
I want these listeners to be able to say, hey, you know what? That might be a safe option for me at
Yep.
this moment.
Right. Yep.
And then once I get through that one, maybe I am brave enough or can see that I can take another step. And
Yep.
maybe I go and attend a church, or maybe I go and see a therapist or a psychologist, or maybe,
Yep.
whatever the case may be,
Yeah.
listen to another podcast.
Yep. That's
Whatever.
like the definition of titration, like taking
Okay.
it like a tiny little bit at a time. And so it's taken from chemistry. When you add too much of a substance to something else too quickly, it boils over,
Yeah.
right? But if you add it slowly, it
Yes.
gives time to adjust and learn, and then eventually you'll get everyking you need to in there, but you just need
Yeah.
to take it in manageable chunks. And so
Oh my
that's
gosh,
where,
I love that.
yeah, yep. And so that's because it's not going to do anybody any good to dump everything in and then you're in crisis and crisis and crisis.
Well,
Like
then you
that's
have to deal with something new. You're just dealing with
right.
a new set of issues. That's
Yep,
it.
you're just essentially
On top of all the old ones that are still
you're just
there.
re-wounding yourself. And
Right.
that's not going to get you anywhere, you know? And
Oh,
so taking it in those manageable steps, you know, realizing like it took time to get to
Mhm.
the place you're at. So it will likely take time to get to where you want to be.
Yeah.
And nobody's timeline looks the same. Like, and
No.
okay. And grief is also not just this straight line of like, I'm going through the
No.
steps.
It's like a
It looks
ball of
like a
yarn.
jumbled, yeah, it's like a jumbled hodgepodge mess. Like, and that's
Yeah.
okay, and it's okay to not be okay and to need help. It's okay that a video game is a good first step for you. It's okay. All of those things are okay. And it's really valid. Like, I guess the other thing I would say is just learn to be kind to yourself. Like when you're going through all of these things, like grieving at the loss of anything, a pet, a friend, time, a relationship,
Yeah.
it is okay to be kind to yourself. And something my psychologist said to me that helped, it was like profound to me. She's like, Kathy, how would you feel? How would you feel if, because I was having crazy nightmares at this time, like go nightmares, like I would wake up like frozen and like
Sure.
really bad. And she's like, how would you treat a friend who just like recounted a bunch of their trauma to you? It's like, I would give them a hug and let them know everything's okay. I would ask them if they wanted, like, they need a drink of water. Do you need a snack? Like, what do you need?
Yeah.
How can I help you? She's like, yes, that's awesome. Now, when you wake up in the middle of the night from a crazy panic attack dream, can you do that for yourself?
Right.
Treat yourself with the same compassion you would so freely extend to a friend or someone you care about. And I'm like, duh, like that makes so much sense, but just was not even on my radar.
Well,
you
because
know
you were always taught that you were last.
yeah, and just not allowed to even have feelings.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
So,
that too. I mean, there is
oh,
that.
so like why in the world would I take care of my feelings, anyways. And so learning to just treat yourself with kindness and compassion that you would like so freely extend to someone else. And that has been amazing to just learn to be kind and understanding with myself has been a tricky journey, but it's one worth having. um and I'd say that about any form of healing. Like it's hard and it's weighty, but it's so worth it to put in that hard work to get to a better place. Another podcast that's been so extremely helpful is the Sleeping at Last podcast.
Okay.
Sleeping at Last is one of my all-time favorite bands. Oh, this just said low battery. Am I
Uh-oh.
back? We're good.
You're here.
But Sleeping at Last is one of my all-time favorite recording artists, and he does a podcast. And a couple of years ago, he lost his mom.
Okay.
And so it was just so timely. And to me, that's like fingerprints of God or like someone bigger looking out for me.
Yep.
But he, leading up to this past Mother's Day, so my first Mother's Day without my mom here, like released podcasts about he made 4 songs about his mom and like the grieving process he went through with his mom. And so 4 songs and then 4 podcasts, like a podcast to go with each song.
Okay.
And about like how he's processed the grief of losing his mom. And I was like, leading up to Mother's Day, like I couldn't have asked for that to be orchestrated any more perfectly for me, and so
What
like
was
that's
his name again?
it's Sleeping at Last.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for any of you that have lost your mom out there, like
Yeah.
all the links, as you know, will be below this podcast. So
Yeah.
everything that she's dropped will be below this podcast. You can find it, and you can utilize it. That way you don't have to go hunting and forget about it. Put it on the burner, the to-do list, all those things.
Yeah. So stuff like that has been instrumental, I would say, in how I've moved forward. So yes, all of my help with Sarah, but then things like that just seem to like pop up as like little like nods,
Yeah.
like, yep, this is helpful, or like, oh yeah, that will do it,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Well, I have absolutely loved this chat that we've had going on almost 2 hours now.
Oh my gosh.
But it's just so easy to get in and start talking about this stuff. There's so much, and I think that people understand, like I've said this many, many times. You don't get out of childhood without wounds and scars. You don't get out of childhood without grief. But the amount of which grief that you do get out of childhood, you still have to, it's your responsibility to take care of it. It's your
Yeah.
responsibility to release it, to understand it, to know it, and it's your journey to walk with it.
Yeah.
It's yours, and you're
Mhm.
the only one that will have everything that you have. Like it's
Mhm.
yours. But we also have to take time to understand it, to deal with it,
Yeah.
eventually help those other people through it too, I
Exactly.
believe.
Yeah.
Um, it's an amazing thing to look back and say, you know what? I can be here for you because I've been where you're at. I
Yep.
see where you're at.
Mhm.
And even if it's just to sit with the lights off
I
and
can
cry,
do that. Yep.
do that. I don't
Yeah.
have to say a word. You
Yep.
don't have to say a word. Like
Yeah.
just being with them and understanding the emotions and the validation that is needed in our society today, because we're always just told to sweep it under the rug and let's just keep going. Damn it,
Yeah.
we got shit to do. We got products to sell. We got
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. You miss out on so much of like the human experience.
Yes.
I feel like trying to rush through things. And I had a friend like I that came to stay with me like the first few days after my mom passed. And it was the middle of the night and she came in to check on me. I wasn't in my bed. I was like just sitting on the floor crying. And she's like, why don't you get up on your bed? I'm like, it doesn't feel safe because it's so squishy. Like, I just needed to be by something stable. And like,
Mhm.
just someone to be like, that didn't need to make sense to her. She was just like, okay, let me get you a blanket,
Yeah,
someone to just be there. And I just needed something firm. I needed to feel grounded in that moment.
right.
And my bed was too squishy and she didn't need to or understand that didn't need to resonate with her, but she was just like, I got you, like, and so stuff
Right.
like that.
You don't
So
have to understand it. It's
yeah,
not your job to understand it. It's just your job
exactly.
to be there.
Yep. And so
That's it.
she's just like, let me get you a blanket. I'll be
Yeah.
right over. And so she just sat there. She's like, do you want a hug? Do you not want a hug? I'm like,
Yeah.
no. She's like, okay, I'm just right here. And that's something I think can be really intimidating, probably to
It is.
someone who is like grief adjacent, like,
Yes.
what do I do with my hands? Like, I don't know what to do with this situation. Like, it can feel like a lot, but just being there um, is so, so helpful, like just sending them that text like here for you,
Yeah.
but then also following through if they do need something,
Yeah.
is really important too. And so you don't have to have all the right words to say, you don't even have to have any words to say, just being
No.
like, you're the person who's grief adjacent, just like, what do you need? And they probably won't have an answer for you because we don't know what
Generally
that
they don't.
means.
I know I
Yeah,
never did.
we
I'd be
don't
like,
know what we need.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah, and so I don't know. I saw this post going around that was like about grief groceries. Did you see that one? I was like,
Yes.
that's
I
so
posted that
thoughtful.
one.
Yeah, it's so thoughtful. Like, get them fast freezer food that they can just pop in the microwave and eat. Like, that was, I was thinking about it. I'm like, that would have been so helpful in that first little bit, losing my mom. So I didn't have that, but I did have someone gift me a DoorDash gift card. That was so
Oh, that,
thoughtful.
yeah. Yep. I've heard
You
of that one as well. Like
yeah,
it's amazing the things that people, smarter people than I come up with for like things like
right.
this. And I'm
Yeah,
so thankful that they're out there, like in this digital age that we have, like
yeah,
there's a lot of things out there. So,
yeah.
but
Yeah, just like,
going back to,
can I come do a load of your laundry? Like,
yeah,
maybe not even ask them, like, will you be home? I want to do a load of your laundry. Like, not can
right,
I, like, I would like to do this. Is this a good time?
let me do
You
your
know?
dishes. Let me
Yeah.
take out your trash.
Yeah.
Things like that. No, I love that. But going
Mhm.
back to what you said about the grief and the oh shoot, don't lose it, Faith. Don't lose it. About the
Yeah.
emotions and stuff.
Yeah.
And people not knowing what to say. And I think it's
Yeah.
because we've conditioned them that everything is okay always. So
Right. Or
when
that you
everything is
always have
not
to have something.
okay,
Yeah.
we don't know how to handle it as
Yeah.
society. Like they're like, oh, they're supposed to be okay. What do I do now?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. What do we do? What do we do?
Yep. No, for sure. And I think it's just, yeah, if you're that grief adjacent person, know Like, it's okay that you don't have all the answers.
Well, it's okay that you don't do anything. You just there. Just be
Yep,
there. That's the thing, is just
exactly.
be there. You don't
Yep,
have to have these magical words of wisdom. You don't have to do anything magical like uh, bring the moon and the stars in closer for a brighter night. You don't have to do any of that stuff.
yeah, just
You
being
just have to
there.
be human.
Yep, and like, yeah, showing up in like a practical way. Like
Yeah,
if people like, because they're not gonna know. Like they're not gonna know what they need. Um,
no.
I sometimes still people are like, "You need anything?" And I'm like, "I don't know."
Yeah.
I still
Or
don't
my
know.
first thing is like, no, because I don't want to bother them. So I
Exactly.
say, no, I'm good. But in
Yep.
reality, I probably could have. I just, again,
Yeah.
this goes back to my childhood, is like, I was always taught that I can do everything.
Yep. We're
And I
self-sufficient.
can do everything. The problem is do I need to do everything?
Yeah, and probably not.
No, you're probably
No.
right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, Kathy, I have had the best time chatting with you on this.
This has been great.
It has been amazing. I'm so sorry for the roller coaster that you've been on. I'm super happy and grateful that you were able to find your way out and find help and get to a
Yep.
stable, solid point in your life.
Mhm.
I'm so happy for that.
Me
Um,
too.
but if there's one thing you could leave our listeners with, what would that be? One thought, one
Oh,
whatever. What would you
oh,
say?
and one thing, I would just say seek professional help if at all humanly possible, when it feels safe to you. It was like the game changer.
Right.
Um, Without that, I would not have been able to weather the roller coaster, as you called it, that I've been on. I wouldn't have made it. And so, yeah, I would say professional help is okay to need, and um,
Mhm.
it's a game changer.
Well, I appreciate you and I appreciate everything. And thank you so much for coming on here and sharing
Yeah.
your story.
Yes. Thanks for having me, Faye.
You're welcome. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye,
Yeah.
guys. Thank you so much for listening to this special episode of Release. All the links plus a few extras are posted in the show notes below. And if you think someone you know could benefit by listening to this episode, please share it with them. And as always, keep going, keep being, keep doing. You are amazing.